Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 81 of the Alabama Liberal Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the culture wars. This is COVID culture, campus culture, cancel culture, police culture, red culture, blue culture, one culture, two culture, all the cultural battles going on. That's a Dr. Seuss reference there. I try not to be too high-minded and literary, but sometimes these things slip out. Try not to get too highbrow on you, but very concerned, not so much with Trump, but about the next Trump, because I see the media making the same fucking mistakes again that they made the last time. We finally get rid of this guy, and then they're promoting Ted Cruz. And by promoting Ted Cruz, I mean they do really strange things. Like, I know he was torn apart for taking the trip to Cancun, but 2 days later, he's laughing about it at CPAC. So clearly he doesn't think that his audience really cares about that. He'll survive it. He's not going to resign. They say Ted Cruz must resign. That motherfucker will have to be dragged out of the Senate, bare-knuckled and bloody. I mean, he's not going anywhere unless they unelect him, which they should, and I wish they had 2 years ago, but we're stuck with him for about 4 years. And in his mind, he's thinking, well, this will blow over. The blizzard is temporary. They'll forget 4 years from now. It won't be a big deal. That's what he thinks, and he could be right. We've seen Republicans survive pretty terrible scandals so far. The biggest thing is, when they show Ted Cruz, and before Cancun, they're like, Ted Cruz must, this is the media. They said Ted Cruz must resign. His actions for the insurrection were terrible and horrible, and he's a traitor, and he should be arrested. He should resign from the Senate. Then the next night, here to talk now about why he doesn't want to vote for Biden's stimulus, Senator Ted Cruz. So it's been really odd to see this man, the media, CNN and some other outlets, and a lot of different media outlets have talked about he sucks, he should resign, he's a traitor to America, he's a neo-Confederate, he's an insurrectionist, he tried to launch a coup, he has no business being in the Senate, and then ask him, why do you think the 1.9 trillion stimulus is too much? Or why did you block Biden's cabinet pick? And I mean, who gives a shit? Why are we talking to this man at all? Why does anybody care why he votes or what he does? Or I see them do that, and I see them do it with Marjorie Taylor Greene. SNL's made her a recurring punchline. This kind of boosts her profile the way that they did for Sarah Palin. They boost her profile with these impressions. She's able to become a media figure. Sarah Palin has never been a politician, maybe for a couple years, but she's had a much longer shelf life on Dancing with the Stars, on The Masked Singer, on all these tacky reality shows, Hanging with the Palins or whatever the fuck that show was, and basically just becoming a media figure, going around. And the more they put her out there, the more that it boosts her profile, so that the conservative people are like, well, they're attacking Sarah Palin. That means she's a big get. If we put her out here, then we can draw a crowd. We can have a fundraiser. People will pay $20 a pop to come watch her drink a big gulp in response to Bloomberg's soda ban. I'm afraid they're doing the same thing on Marjorie Taylor Greene. I love Bill Maher, but I have to say this. For 5 years, all we heard, because it was even before Trump became president, the whole year, the 2 years before that, Maher was all about Trump. So for 5 years, we heard Trump's terrible. The media promoted this man. They put him in office. He's the worst thing that ever happened to America. The second Trump's out of office, the shows he's done this year, they're almost exclusively about cancel culture, political correctness, the excesses of the left, how crazy the left has gotten. He's still drawing a false comparison between the rioters and insurrectionists in the Republican Party and a Twitter mob. I tell you, if it's me, I'd rather have the Twitter mob myself. You know, I don't think those people are literally going to fucking kill me or even try to. So I'll take the Twitter mob any day of the week versus like actual physical danger from those people who clearly were trying to kill people. But he keeps drawing that parallel as though they're kind of the same. He attacks the same thing over and over as though the 90s never ended. And it really, I think, does a disservice, because we hear about how evil Trump is when he's in office. Then the second Biden's in office, you're kind of creating the next Trump by constantly going after liberals on a handful of little pet tiny things that I know they're annoying. Political correctness is annoying, but it's not going to kill anybody. It's not going to get me killed. And so to compare, I could lose my health care with, there's Twitter hashtags I don't agree with. They're not the same thing. And because people keep trying to combine them, like one has real world consequences. And it's to the point now, people will be like, yeah, I hate political correctness too. That's why I'm going to vote for that Klansman over there. I mean, it's starting to feel a little phony, to be honest. It's a little fake. It's a lot of people who, you don't hate political correctness. You're a bigot. And I'm not saying that for Maher or anybody specific, but I have noticed that bigots routinely hate political correctness. And I mean, I've made videos about it. There are things that are annoying. There's people who've lost their jobs that I don't think should have or whatever, but they're very rare. I mean, really rare cases of things like that. And you can always just ignore it. People say shit to me on Twitter or YouTube or whatever. Just ignore it, honestly. You don't have to respond. You don't have to take the bait every single time. And a lot of my trolls, they're not from the left, they're from the right wing. The right wing's been the one that tried to shut me down. The first time I had a Twitter account, I actually had to delete it because I said something about Republicans and they went crazy. There was a woman who, she had fired some shots at the House of Representatives or something. Didn't hit anybody, didn't even come close. This was like years ago. This was before Trump took office for sure. Obama was president. The Tea Party might have been somewhere in his second term or something like that, but somewhere around there. But this woman shot shots, and I said something like, well, unfortunately, no Tea Party members were hit. Clearly a joke, not that big of a fucking deal, not advocating like, hey, go pick up a rifle and shoot Paul Ryan. Not saying that at all, and they know that. So the same fucking people squalling, being like, how come I can't say the N-word anymore? This country's got too sensitive. When I put out a tweet, they went nuts. They were squalling. I had hundreds of just attacks basically a day. The left has done that to me sporadically every once in a while, maybe a Bernie person here, maybe a slight misstep about race there, maybe a little bit about pushback from Me Too, but it's rare, it's sporadic. They have bigger fish to fry. They really don't care, I don't think. And so this was the right wing. And this was the people who went crazy. And that's the ultimate irony, is the only people who have actually gotten Bill Maher canceled are the right wing. ABC canceled Politically Incorrect because Bill Maher said the 9/11 hijackers, they were not cowards because they were willing to die for what they believed in. That was his stance. Not sure I really agree with that, but that was his stance. And ABC canceled him. And it was because conservatives pitched a fit. I would never say he must be canceled for saying something like that. That's insane. I mean, that's his right, to say, I don't have to agree with him about everything he says, to watch his show or whatever, or just to think he should have a show. That's who got him canceled, was conservatives that pitched a fit about it. Then he wound up with a better job over on HBO. If cancel culture is real, how has Bill Maher been on the air for 30 fucking years? This man's had a TV show for 30 years, from Comedy Central to ABC to HBO. He keeps getting better TV shows every time that he does move on. And I have to look at it and think, this man who's 65 years old, worth $150 million, he co-owns the New York Mets. He has no dependents, never been married, no alimony, no current spouses. What the fuck is this guy so worried about? I mean, really and truly, like, he could be canceled tomorrow. He could still probably do casino gigs because he's always like, hey, I'll be at the Foxwoods Casino in Connecticut this weekend. Gets paid probably $1 million for every casino gig he does. He could still probably do that for the rest of his life if he wanted to. He doesn't need the money. Doesn't really enjoy anything. He said he's never been to Asia. He's not really that big on traveling, except it sounds like to the casinos he performs at. He's gone on Stern and said, I don't collect art. I don't collect cars. I don't have alimony. I don't have child support. I don't have dependents. I don't know what this guy could really do being on the air another 2 years that he couldn't do right now. I really have no idea what difference it would make. I loved Religulous, his documentary. I love that movie, but he hasn't made a movie in over a decade. He's not said, I want to make a sequel. I want to make another documentary. He's never said, I want to make another documentary. He probably actually could if he were to get fired from Real Time. But other than just, well, I host Real Time this year and I want to host it for 5 more years, I'm not sure what even could be taken away from him if he were so-called cancel culture or whatever. And it's the same for a lot of these people. Joe Rogan says cancel culture is coming to get me. They could lock me in the basement. This man just signed a huge, enormous deal with Spotify, like a $100 million deal with Spotify. He got promoted saying all these offensive things. Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson, they're the big swinging dicks at Fox. There's always a Tucker Carlson, boycott him, boycott that. He's like the top-rated cable news host. Rush Limbaugh has been on the air saying offensive shit. My entire life he's been on the air saying, the only thing that canceled him was cancer, okay? Cancer canceled Rush Limbaugh, nothing else, right? The libs never got him, the feminazis never got him, his own biology got him. And this was a man who went after people that suffer from Parkinson's and things like that. He went after every soft target, bullying everybody you could imagine, punched down to every group. And at the end of his life, he's worth $500 million and was a recent Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient. It's really impossible for me to feel sorry for these fucking people. The same time Bill Maher's been on the air, Jay Leno and Conan O'Brien, 2 non-offensive talk show hosts, they've both ended their careers in late night. And these are people that don't do the same kind of jokes or whatever. But it does get a little crazy that these people who were that worried about cancel culture never seem to actually get canceled. Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson, I had no idea who these fucking guys were. I'm dead serious. I didn't know who they were till they started ranting and raving. The libs are after me. They're trying to cancel me. They're trying to censor me. Who the fuck are you to be canceled or censored, right? I get what people are saying in that, yeah, you get a lot of criticism, People are not going to like Tucker Carlson. They're not going to kiss Laura Ingram's ass. They might say boycott Laura Ingram. At one time, Laura Ingram had almost no advertisers on her show, but Fox kept her on anyway. She's still on the air today. She said terrible things. She's still on the air. So it's not saying you're going to be canceled, because Tucker's still out there, Sean Hannity's still out there, Laura Ingram's still out there, Bill Maher's still out there, Rush Limbaugh died. He had to die to get canceled. Howard Stern, on and on. You could go down the list of people. Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson, they've turned that into an industry. They've been like, I'm standing up to cancel culture. Now buy my book, listen to my podcast, give me money, be my sponsor. And they've turned that into like, oh, we're fighting a battle. The only people that I've seen quit the media game of personalities, they quit. They weren't canceled. Melissa Harris Perry quit her job at MSNBC. Glenn Beck quit his job at Fox News. So these are people that voluntarily stepped down. Bari Weiss quit her job at the New York Times and then went out and said it was in response to cancel culture. You weren't canceled. You got promoted for no fucking reason because you're not a good writer and your points are not even that great. And then you quit and you bitch about cancel culture. Why did they quit? People were criticizing me. That's the fucking part of the game. I've been doing Alabama Liberal for 10 years. People shit on me all the time. YouTube, Twitter, my website. You got to be a little bit strong to be out there and be a political pundit. And I still don't give a shit. I could say 10 times more offensive stuff, get 10 times the hatred. I don't give a fuck. Why am I supposed to care what somebody I've never met who lives across the country who's never going to meet me? These people who say stuff online, if they met you in person, would be like, Bari Weiss, can I have a selfie? You know what I mean? Online, they'll be like, on Twitter, they'll be like, oh, Bill Maher, he's so bad. If they see him out in public, it'll be like, can I have a selfie? And he'll probably say no because he doesn't look that friendly. But your fear is not being canceled. It's that people are disagreeing with you, which is part of it. If you think that's bad, try being Alabama Liberal doing this 10 years for no fucking money. No profits, doing this, getting shit on. I get it from conservatives. I get it from Bernie people. I get it from a lot of different groups and still doing it out there, even though you don't have a clear demographic because you're not the farthest of the far left. But you also like, obviously, Alabama Liberal. A lot of Alabama people go in there. I hate you. I disagree with you. You suck. Kay Ivey should deport you is what somebody said at one point, which I don't really live there for her to do that. But that was just funny to me anyway. You know, if I do get deported, can it be somewhere to the Caribbean? I think I would enjoy that. Okay. So if I do, can it be there? I just think that it's very exaggerated. I think it makes people more afraid. Bill Maher literally in his last show said everybody should be afraid of cancel culture. They're coming for everybody. And that is bullshit. I'm sorry. Love the guy. You can love people and disagree with them. People disagree with them liberal all the time. Again, it does not bother me. This is my opinions. I'm not forcing everyone to share them. And then if they don't, be like, they're trying to cancel me. I'm under attack. Some people just don't agree with what I'm saying. And that's part of the game of being a media personality. And they should, you would think, be a little bit used to it or a little bit less sensitive over those kind of things. But cancel culture is not coming for everybody. And when he says stuff like that, that's the problem. People hear that and they think that. And you have fucking retirees in Sheboygan being like, I got to vote for Trump because the Democrats, I'm walking on eggshells. No matter what I say, I could lose my job. You don't have a job. You're retired. You're drawing unemployment, worried about losing your job that you don't even fucking have. It's ridiculous. And so this paranoia that seeped into it, yes, AOC is annoying. Yes, Twitter liberals can be annoying. Yes, John Oliver and Ezra Klein and Vox and people like that can be very annoying. But they don't necessarily represent the Democratic Party. Democratic Party is whatever you want to make it. It's a huge tent. It's not the Republican Party where you've got Trump and you got to march behind him or he's going to go butt fucking nuts on Twitter. And how funny is that, by the way, that the guy who's against cancel culture, Alec Baldwin did an impression of me that I don't like. So we need to cancel Saturday Night Live. Oh, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, they're going to say mean things about me. I'm not going and they shouldn't have it. The AT&T and Time Warner merger, I want to block that because CNN says shit about me I don't like. CNN should be canceled. They should have their licenses removed. The most sensitive fucking crybaby in the world is the poster guy for the people who are afraid about cancel culture. Barack Obama, I know they think that if you said something bad about Barack Obama, you're automatically labeled racist and you had to go away forever. A lot of people got rich saying bad stuff about Barack Obama. A lot of people got elected saying bad stuff about Barack Obama. 1,000 Democrats who lost their seats. This could be in the Congress, the Senate, the State House, the State Senate, the judicial races, the governor's races. A lot of Democrats lost their jobs during the Obama administration. And a lot of Republicans got their jobs specifically due to blowback. So I think that's bullshit. It's too much. People are too worried about it and they're too afraid of it. But now outrage culture, which is different than cancel culture. Outrage culture is there's an outrage every 2 to 3 minutes. We get really bent out of shape about it, and a week later we forgot about it and moved on to something else. I might think cancel culture was real had I not gone through some of that with Campbell Hall. Now, I know people may be tired of me bringing this school up, but back in episode 53, I laid out a very clear case of I assumed what these people were saying was true. Got a black kindergarten kid getting racially bullied and harassed and mistreated at a private school with a lot of celebrities, and he's there on a diversity and inclusion scholarship. And then he gets literally excluded from first grade after months of, in my opinion, abuse, objective terms, bullying at the least, by adults that I witnessed. I thought this would be kind of a big deal from what I've heard from people, mostly white, complaining like, oh, if we so much as say anything now, we're going to get fired and we're going to... No, none of that shit happened. I mean, none of that happened in a case that should have been kind of high profile because there was celebrities at the school indirectly involved, given to the fund, or sitting on the board of directors at that school. It's a very well-known and rich and elitist private school in Los Angeles. This is 2019 that I'm out there trying to get people to care about this. This is 2020, pre-COVID. 3 months later, the George Floyd riots erupt the country. From when I kind of stopped when COVID happened because the country shut down or whatever, but literally I'm out there not 3 months before George Floyd. Nobody gives a damn. Then George Floyd happens. I still go to reporters and send the story out, and they say they'll look into it. Nobody still gives a damn. You have to look at it and think, I think a lot of this is for show. I think people think the country has changed a lot more than it really has. And you always hear Trumpers say, Obama, he's coming for my guns and Bibles. Well, he never did that. But then they dusted off the same lines and used it against Biden. Biden's coming for my guns and my Bibles. Biden is way more religious than Trump is. I mean, way more religious than Trump is. Guns, about the same, I would think. Trump wasn't a huge gun lover before he ran for president. I mean, this idea that we can just dust off the same shit we said about Obama, and it didn't come true, but nobody cares, and we'll use it against Biden. And you see them do that. And it's the culture wars. People are terrified of an imaginary, largely exaggerated problem. And that's political correctness, which I don't think is worse than it has been. People keep saying it's out of control. It's what they've been saying that since the 90s. They've been saying, Bill Maher's been saying that for 30 fucking years. He's on HBO now. He can say fuck. He can say racial slurs. He can say more shit now than he's ever been able to, arguing that political correctness is worse than it was in the 90s. We just have the most openly bigoted president in a century, at least, probably since Andrew Johnson. And people are saying that political correctness is out of control and it's gotten nothing but worse. Joe Biden, I love the guy, but I mean, he's made a lot of fumbles in the past that people like John Oliver would criticize him for, and he got elected. He got the most votes of any presidential candidate ever in history. And in the Democratic Party, the so-called far left, wackadoo Democratic Party where you can't sneeze the wrong way without it being called racist, supposedly, so they say, Joe Biden beat out 20 other fucking candidates to become the nominee. So I don't think that's true. And I think that people have really exaggerated that to an extent that it drives voters into the arms of the Republican Party. And it's important to draw a distinction. When I talk to people that are Republican, and I know a lot of Republicans, probably more than Democrats, they don't bitch about Chuck Schumer. It's Amy Schumer. How is somebody running for county sheriff supposed to shut up? So like, I'm going to tell Lena Dunham to fuck off. Like, what are they supposed to do about loudmouth liberal celebrities that you don't like? They're not even in the Democratic Party. It would be one thing if this was Joe Biden that they had a problem, but it's not Joe Biden. And it's not like Tom Perez. And it's really not even, they hate Nancy Pelosi, but it's really not even her. It's celebrities that are outside the Democratic Party, movements that are outside the Democratic Party, Me Too and Black Lives Matter. These didn't start organically inside the Democratic Party. Me Too got big, taking down powerful Democratic politicians and figures. Harvey Weinstein was a Democratic mega donor, and he had the biggest fall from grace. Other Democrats, big-time celebrities like Kevin Spacey hosted a lot of fundraisers for the Democrats. These were some of the biggest names in the Me Too movement. I, off the top of my head, cannot name, and there may be one, but I cannot name a Republican that was quote-unquote taken down by the Me Too movement. I wish there was, quite frankly. I wish I could come up with somebody, but the closest you could even kind of say is Roy Moore losing to Doug Jones, but that's not just Me Too. People hate Roy Moore. Republicans hate Roy Moore. In Alabama, he had run for governor twice, and got monkey stomped. I mean, he didn't even make the runoff of the primary when he ran against Bentley. People didn't want him to be the senator from Alabama. In their minds, I think McConnell and all the others are like, hey, we'll let Doug Jones have it for a couple years. Really doesn't fucking matter. We still have the majority, so we're not going to lose the majority. And then in a few years, we can run somebody that we can actually stand to be around who doesn't make us look bad. They knew that it would be a Pyrrhic victory to have Roy Moore win. They'd pick up one seat and they'd get the biggest headache they've ever had. Roy Moore would be down at the Capitol being what Marjorie Taylor Greene is now, bringing his gun onto the Senate floor, talking nonsense, trying to act like he's Yosemite Sam, dueling pistols and shit. And I mean, he would be such an embarrassment that I really think they thought, Doug Jones we can live with for 3 years till we get somebody else in that seat. And they don't have the majority. It doesn't make a difference. We're still going to do whatever we want to do. And they did. So I think that had less to do with me too, and just more that Republicans didn't want fucking Roy Moore. Trump didn't want him. He didn't want to share his spotlight with Roy Moore. Roy Moore even said, I was Trump before Trump was Trump. A dig that Trump was a Democrat for years and years. And Roy Moore's been a fanatical, fucking nutty conservative for a long time. I mean, his conservative bona fides are real. And I think he's kind of implying that Trump's are not. And that's true. And I don't think Trump wanted a guy like that around at all. He doesn't want to share the spotlight. But once we talk about cancel culture is not real, then we look at campus culture. And this is another thing that people have overreacted to. They say college campuses, they're out of control. They're crazy liberal playgrounds. You can't even do anything without people saying that's offensive, that's sexist, that's racist. Yeah, but you got to understand, people have been saying that. They've been saying college campuses are nutty liberal dens for like literally since the 60s. This culture war battle about colleges, conservatives, they're kind of stuck in a time machine because they've been saying that. Back in the 60s, you actually had some real radicals on college campuses, okay? Today, these safe space crybabies, they're fucking yuppies compared to the real radicals from the 60s. These people hijacked planes. They fucking kidnapped people. Literally, you had people on college campuses that were sympathetic to the Weather Underground and the people that kidnapped Patty Hearst. And the Black Panthers at Cornell, they took hostages in the 70s. They literally took hostages in Willard Hall on the 70s in Cornell. Could you imagine today's, I'm afraid of guns, I'm a safe spacer? Like, could you imagine today's campus left doing some shit like that? You had 60s and 70s radicals. They would spit on Vietnam soldiers. They would come home from the war. Vietnam people, they were drafted. There was a draft. It's not like they wanted to be there. It's not like anybody was like, what's your summer break? I want to go to Viet Cong and, maybe get a tan. But they come back and they're called baby killer because they didn't flee to Canada or get around it like Mitt Romney and Trump and a lot of the rich people did. So they spit on them. They burned bras. They sided with very violent radical groups like I've named, the Weather Underground, the PLA movement, different things. I mean, it was not uncommon to see like a 60s radical just walk around with a machine gun. People say, well, now some of the Black Lives Matter people, some of them have a lot of guns. Yeah, some of them. But taking hostages on Cornell at Willard Hall, it's impossible for me to look at today's campus left and say, oh, they're protesting Milo Yiannopoulos, basically the same as the 60s. I mean, it's nuts to make that comparison. It just shows that a lot of the culture war battles, they're stuck in a time machine. You have GIA, which is guns, immigration, abortion, and you have political correctness, and you have taxes. And these are the only 5 things I've seen that Republicans really and truly care about. And they have to keep playing up the culture war battles because a lot of their ideas are so unpopular. If you took the Republican ideas and put them in a bowl, it would be like dog shit in a punch bowl. That's how popular their ideas would be. Really think about their ideas. Abortion, we want to outlaw it. Okay, but you said you were for small government. Yeah, but not for that. So for like the biggest thing that would be small government, which is forcing a woman to have kids she doesn't want, you want to outlaw that. Yeah, we do. So you want to take away one of my rights and one of my freedoms that we've had my entire lifetime. We've had it for 50 years, but you want to take away a freedom from me, the so-called party of the freedom people, the patriot people. Yeah, we do. That's not a popular stance. Their economics, everything that has helped the middle class ever has been a Democratic idea. Republicans hated Social Security. They wanted to privatize Social Security forever and ever. They still do. They want to privatize Medicare, Medicaid. These are incredibly popular government programs, and they've hated them. They've tried every way in the world to gut them, delete them, diminish them, hurt them in some way. Disability, unemployment, unions. They had all these things, and the majority of Americans love them. Workman's comp. Every state that Republicans control has significantly worse workman's comp laws and regulations. Right to work. Most employers might love right to work. Most employees hate it. I don't know anybody who would look at California's labor laws, Alabama's labor laws, as an employee and say, I'll take Alabama's. They suck. It's less wages. Democrats want to raise the minimum wage. Republicans hate that. They want to keep the minimum wage stuck like it's still 1980, right? That's where they want to keep it at. $7.50 an hour is what I got paid in Alabama 15 to 20 years ago. And I think it's barely shifted at all since then. But even then it sucked. I was doing back-breaking work, back-breaking labor, really tough jobs. These were really physical jobs. They said, well, that's what 16, 17-year-olds, that's what they're meant for. I mean, why shouldn't I be properly compensated for my labor? I have a scar from where I fell on a box cutter. As I said in a previous podcast, I got electrocuted. I have a red spot in my left eye. My vision is worse in my left eye from where hot grease flew into my eye. These are permanent, lifelong injuries that I sustained as a 16-year-old working at Food World for $7 an hour. You get a paycheck, and at the time you're a kid, so you think $100 a week or $200 a week. You think like, oh man, this is great. Somebody literally bragged like, at Walmart you can get $1,000 a month, and that was their idea of a really great wage. That's a bad wage even back then, and they barely shifted at all. So you look at it today and be like, okay, $15 an hour, and that's what they're fighting. That's what they don't want. And you hear people say, even Joe Manchin, who's a real fucking disappointment, somebody needs to take that guy out back and beat the shit out of that guy. Because that guy, I know that we can't do any better in West Virginia. I think it would be tough to get somebody really good in West Virginia. But you could back some of this shit. Even Dixiecrats like George Wallace, they backed a lot of the progressive things that Bernie Sanders has really adopted. I mean, back then, it wasn't hard. Dixiecrats, people that suck on civil rights issues and social justice issues and social issues that are terrible on those issues, they were decent on economics. Now we got people like Joe Manchin that suck at all of it. They're terrible at all of it. They're not good for anything necessarily. He's even trying to block some of Biden's cabinet picks, which here we are, over a month, almost 2 months into Biden's administration, half of his cabinet hasn't even been confirmed. So, I mean, it's really becoming kind of like, Joe, what are you good for? And I'm talking about Manchin. I should specify because I don't mean Biden necessarily. He's doing everything he can do. But, $15 an hour, that's too much. Maybe that makes sense for California, but for West Virginia or Alabama or wherever, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, that's $600 a week before taxes are taken out. No health insurance, no benefits, no nothing, okay? That's really, $15 an hour that's the floor that they're fighting as too much, and I don't know a lot of people that could live on that. And I know that they're saying, well, it's not meant to live on, but people do. In a state like Alabama, in a rural area like where I'm from in the Northeast, a lot of the jobs are minimum wage jobs. And if they can pay less than that, they will. There's a abundance of undocumented labor, immigrant labor, things like that. The chicken plants, that's what they prefer to hire. They will fight any type of, if they don't have to pay a decent wage, they won't pay a decent wage. Regulations. Republicans are like, we don't want regulations. We want you to be able to drink poison drinking water. Most people really don't have a huge problem with regulations. They don't impact their lives that much. And it's necessary things, as we've seen over and over again. Food will be poisoned. Drinking water will be poisoned if these regulations are not in place. The Texas power grid, Republicans are all about privatization. Well, they privatized the power grid, and it was a massive failure, as it always is. In their minds, they're stuck in the 40s or 50s. Possibly when private business ran efficiently and government was sloppy and bureaucratic. But all of my worst experiences in this century, in the last 20 years, have not been with the government. It's been with private business. In one of the first 25 or so episodes, way back when, I know it's been almost 5 years ago, but I let out a story about we were trying to kill a mouse and they had subcontractor after subcontractor. More recently, we needed a new dishwasher. Totally private. Government has nothing to do with this. We had to go through Home Depot, who sold the dishwasher, LG, who made the dishwasher, and the subcontractors who would get hired to deliver, install the dishwasher, and remove it, which is like Timco or some kind of company like that were fucking awful. Nobody wants responsibility. You contact LG and they say, hey, Timco, they're just an installer. We can't help it if they do a bad job. Timco shows up. They want us to sign a liability waiver to install the dishwasher. We obviously don't want to do that because the whole point of having them install it is that they're responsible and they're liable if they do a bad job, which if you look at their reviews online, they've got 1,000 reviews and they got a 1-star rating. So they do a lot of bad work. Then you have people from Timco, they're like, we've been doing this 7 years. They don't look like they've been doing it 7 minutes. The guy was in such a hurry to leave our apartment. He literally left his fucking tool belt in our apartment. I'm not kidding about this. He left his tool belt and he drug a brand new washer down a flight of stairs when we have an elevator. That's how stupid this fucking guy was. And we're supposed to sign a liability waiver, so when you inevitably fuck up, we're responsible for it. He says, your pipes are leaking. Turn the water off. There's a switch that you flip to turn the water off. We did it. That's what he considered a leaky pipe. Anybody doing this shit would know to do that, right? You would think. I mean, it was just all this bullshit from a shitty subcontractor. But Home Depot didn't want to, they're like, you have to use them or we don't want to cover it. And LG's like, no, you have to use them because we don't have our own people. And so this triangulation of businesses, and Home Depot's another bad company, by the way, if you can use Lowe's, but this triangulation of businesses is basically passing the buck. No, it's not us at Home Depot. It's LG because they make the washer and Timco because they install it. Well, what the fuck do we need you, Home Depot, for? To be a middleman and take 10% of a transaction that you're saying you don't cover it if there's problems. The subcontractors have to fix that, and the dishwasher manufacturer has to replace it. So what do we really need you for at that point? But this is private business, and this is what it's become. This idea that government is this enormous bureaucracy, this albatross, this unwieldy, archaic thing, this dinosaur in the tar pits. I don't really know if that's true anymore, because a lot of people saying that they must not have dealt with private business a lot recently, and I'm talking about in the last 20, 30 years or what. I mean, it must be a lot of people really kind of living in a different time period, because so much shit now, nobody wants to be responsible for it. And you call one private company and they say, no, that's the other one. Anybody who's ever dealt with people who fix things, one guy comes to fix, let's say it could be a refrigerator. The first guy comes and says, yeah, no, it's fine. We're going to fix this. The second guy comes and says, oh, yeah, the first guy, he did this wrong and he fucked up the motor. So you're going to need a new motor. The third guy comes to put in the motor and is like, no, the second guy was wrong. It's not the motor. It was supposed to be. Every fucking person that comes in says the last guy did a bad job and you got to replace this. And then finally somebody comes in and says, hey, we're just going to replace the whole washer or the whole refrigerator or the whole fucking car battery or whatever it is. And you think, well, why didn't you do that in the beginning? But then there's another guy who has to come in because that guy recommended it and now he's got to install it, and the whole process begins over again where he's not sure how to do it. It's a lot of that. And so when the Republican Party says, let's privatize everything that people like, from Social Security to power grids, Medicare, Medicaid, that's a really bad idea. Most people don't agree with that. So most people like disability. They like workman's comp. They like Medicare. They like Medicaid. They like Social Security. They like unions. And so Republicans are left with a really big problem. Most of their issues are not popular. People don't like them and they don't want to agree with them. So how do you get them on your side? How do you win over the masses when you're not a massive party? You're a 1% party. Everything they advocate for, it helps the 1%. It helps people who are already rich. They don't need to be helped. But they're the largest special interest group, which is where I get into right-wing culture. Right-wing culture's idea is Democrats are controlled by special interest groups. What does that mean? Oh, unions and activists. And I'm like, oh, yeah, those powerful activists. I think in a Republican's mind, the Koch brothers and Black Lives Matter have the same amount of money. Like they make the same amount of money. They can both drop $1 billion check like it's nothing, right? In their minds, that's true. In the real world, it's not true. But activists and unions, these are groups with people in them. So when a group comes in, and I'll just make up a group, it's not a real group as far as I know, but they're like, we're melanin moms against racism or whatever it is, right? That's an activist group, but there's thousands of people in that group, and they want their voice heard. When the Koch brothers want a new regulation passed, they say, here's a check or whatever. But that is a special interest group. Rich, greedy people is the ultimate special interest group. It is the largest special interest group the Republican Party caters to, and they do it in healthcare. They do it in the environment. They do it in private prisons and wanting things like that. So this is the largest group that they cater to. And they don't consider that a special interest. Grover Norquist is the ultimate special interest. He's like, I'm fighting special interest groups. You are a fucking special interest group. Rich people who don't want to pay taxes is the ultimate special interest group and the most powerful special interest group. But and they don't try to appeal to the masses, they then have to come in and be like, how can we win the people over? Political correctness. We'll make them afraid of that because everybody hates it. They don't totally know what it is. Just like cancel culture really varies. And the only person who ever lost their job from cancel culture is Don Imus or some fucking person like that 15 years ago. And really, America is probably less cancel-centric than it was in the 90s and 00s. But because people don't exactly know what it is, we can make them afraid of it. And we can define it however we want to. And when you look at Democrats and they say, we're voting on health care, that's a very tangible thing. We want healthcare to be cheaper. And that's very clear how the government can do that. They can open up drug pricing from all over the world, let American drug makers compete with other countries. If Israel makes a cheaper drug, we're going to allow people to buy that. Okay, we might set some price caps. We might cap pay for hospital administrators and doctors, which they really don't want, but we may have to do that. There's 1,000 ways the government can intervene and make that system cheaper and people's lives better. We saw it with Obamacare. Pre-existing conditions are, done away with for health insurance to be able to be like, oh, we're going to deny you for that. Instantaneously, that made people's lives better. Really clear how Democrats can do government work in a way that helps make healthcare better. It's not clear at all to me how Republican politicians can make political correctness less of a thing. We're going to pass legislation that brings Roseanne Barr back on the air. She's going to have a new show on ABC. They can't do anything about political correctness. So this idea that we're going to elect Republicans specifically because we hate PC culture and political correctness, and then Ted Cruz gets to go to office and do fucking nothing for 6 years. When there's a blizzard in Texas, and I love what the New York Times said, where they basically said it's not that he's a hypocrite, it's that there's people suffering in his state, and he did not think there was any way he could help them or did not want to help them. There was no way he could make their lives better. And you know that's true, because that's how Ted Cruz thinks. He's got that Reagan mentality of, government is not the solution to your problems. Government is the problem. He adopted that mentality to the bone. And so even though there's a blizzard, this is the exact kind of thing government is created to help during crises, which is why you should always vote Democratic, because Republicans have a lot of crises, whether it's the blizzard in Texas or the coronavirus handling or 9/11 or Bush losing to Hurricane Katrina. They're not good in a crisis because they fundamentally, I think in their minds, they don't think it's government's job to intervene and stuff like that, and they don't take it seriously, and then big crises sneak up on them. They're sort of the party you vote for if everything's going well. I'm a woman, and I'm in a loving relationship. I love the guy that I'm with. If we do get pregnant, we want the kid, so I never have to worry about an abortion or whatever. Vote Republican, right? So that's one of those cases where nobody wants to be in an abortion clinic. That's not your first choice. That's not like a hot, oh, you want to go to Cancun or an abortion clinic? I'm not sure. They're both equally fun. Nobody who's there, and I've been there. I've done it. Nobody who's there wants to be there. But it is like, we need this option available in case the best case scenario of every person you ever have sex with is someone you love and want to have a kid with. In case that doesn't happen, which doesn't happen for 99% of people, we need an option in case that's not what happens and someone gets pregnant. So that's one of those things where if everything goes according to plan, the Republican plan makes sense. But we know life doesn't work that way. The same thing for disaster preparedness. Everything makes sense to privatize a power grid and then have no emergency plan and then not implement anything and not mobilize the government and, drag your ass on a coronavirus vaccine distribution plan, which Trump did for months, trying to steal the race, which is why Biden was so behind on that, because he didn't share access with them and any of that stuff. Everything goes according to plan, as long as terrorists don't fly a plane into the World Trade Center, or as long as 2008, the mortgage crisis doesn't happen and almost sink the economy, as long as coronavirus doesn't spread from China to all around the globe, as long as there's not a blizzard in Texas, as long as Hurricane Katrina doesn't flood New Orleans, as long as everything goes according to plan, you might be okay with a Republican. But because we know that doesn't happen, and because life is not about best case scenarios, and Democrats stay up at night, they're the nerd, they're the guy who stays up, they worry about the shit Republicans don't want to deal with. Trump wants to play golf. Bush wants to go hunting and fishing. Bin Laden determined to attack America. What is this crap? Because they don't want to deal with it. That's why they're so bad. That's why they're bad for you. That's why Hoover let the Great Depression happen. And these things don't happen under Democrats for a reason. They're staying up at night, even when times are good, worrying about the worst possible thing that could happen. Al Gore didn't say, let me take Clinton's budget surplus and blow it on some shit we don't need. He said, let's put it in Social Security and make it solvent for the next half century. Smart thinking. Bush blew it on a tax cut nobody needed in the middle of a boom economy. We saw that be a disaster. We saw that directly lead to 2008, where there was a massive recession and there was no fucking money because it had all gone out in tax cuts and debt and deficits. And then Trump does the same fucking thing. Obama leaves him with a massive, booming, amazing economy, and he gives a tax cut to the 1% who don't need it in the middle of a bull market, which makes no fucking sense. And it's because of that lack of rainy day planning that I think people should never vote Republican. I would say never again, because we've seen the same mistakes happen over and over again. But beyond it being the party of best case scenarios, They have started to really suck up to the police. I mention police culture because this is something that comes up all the time, where the party that is the most lawless political party we've seen, and that goes for Nixon, who broke into Watergate and thought it was okay. And Ronald Reagan thought it was okay to screw over Jimmy Carter and make a deal with the Iranians just to make him look bad, not release the hostages until after the election. They thought it was okay to railroad Bill Clinton, a man they knew biggest crime was getting a blowjob in the White House. That's aspirational. I have dreams where I get a blowjob in the White House. There's nothing wrong with that. They tried to stir up birtherism stuff about Obama and just look for things to impeach him over. They steal the race from Gore in 2000. And then they put in a literal criminal, Trump, into the White House, a tax cheat, a man with a Chinese bank account. You could run through the list, and I've done it 100 times. But the most criminally inclined political party in America in the last half century, they're the party of law and order, cops and beatdowns and all that. That's not really about law and order. That's about, we don't want people that are not us to rise up. We want to keep the plantation where it belongs, basically. We want them to do what they're told and not rise up and just basically be invisible. And some of this is what it boils down to, whether it's cancel culture you're worried about. Why is that? In case I say something racist. Political correctness you're worried about. Why is that? Oh, because now there's all these commercials with black people in them. What's that got to do with anything? Well, it's PC. Don't you know that or whatever? Then it comes down to the police. Well, we don't want police to get in trouble for shooting black people, right? And so it really boils down a lot of it to race. They don't want black people seen. They don't like that Kamala Harris is the vice president. They don't like that Barack Obama was the president. They don't like seeing them kind of everywhere. They might like it back in the 50s and 60s in the segregation times. And in the Northeast, I mean, it wasn't literally segregated like the South is, but there's a lot of jobs in the Northeast you knew you couldn't do in Connecticut or wherever else, right? There was a lot of places you couldn't get hired, would not have seen black CEOs, no matter where it was, not just in the Southeast. So they don't necessarily like seeing them do anything but be a gardener or manual labor or a maid or a cook or something kind of subservient. Then they can give them a tip and be like, here's $5 for Christmas, Willie, and I feel good about myself because I'm looking down on you and giving you a tip, and that's the end of that or whatever. So, I mean, it really comes down to Obama, because a black president is the ultimate, like, that's my boss. And a lot of people have a problem with a black boss in the United States. Immigrants who come here sometimes have a problem with it. A lot of Asian people and European people who come here, they're really rude about having a black boss. And so I think it's kind of a universal thing, unfortunately. But I do think that's part of the culture, and that's what's kind of driven the divide in the police culture. Now, when it comes to cops specifically, I think a lot of police have said kind of an equivalent of, and I understand what they're saying, close your eyes and imagine that you're a cop. And my whole life I wanted to be a cop because I wanted to help people. I wanted to, if a guy's beating his wife, I'm the guy to arrest him for domestic abuse. Somebody beats their kids, I'm the guy to arrest them for child abuse. I'm the guy to stop a rape, stop a murder. If there's a car wreck, pull them out of there real quick, a dangerous situation, I can help, I can intervene. I joined it to be helpful. And all of a sudden, I'm the bad guy. I'm the guy that everybody hates. I can't go to McDonald's and not get my coffee spit in. And that's the police sort of think that, and that's their mindset. And I get why they believe that. I really do understand it. But I think that's because they're thinking about it like Superman. Police are not Superman. They're Batman. Superman flies in and everybody loves him and he saves Lois Lane and he stops the, bulldozer from smashing into a school or whatever. Everybody loves Superman. Batman is not liked by everybody. Some people don't like Batman. Some people think he's dangerous. Some people think he's nuts. They think he's a freak. They think he's got mental problems. They think he's as bad as the criminals he's chasing. The Dark Knight Rises trilogy is excellent, and it kind of exploring that dynamic of you either die the hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Probably some cops can relate to that quote. I'm a hero, I'm a hero, I'm a hero, I'm a hero. I shot somebody black today. I'm not a hero, and I'm the villain. Everybody hates me, right? And so they're adopting the mentality of Superman when they're Spider-Man. Half the people in New York, they hate Spider-Man. Jonah Jameson in the media, they launch a one-man crusade against Spider-Man. He's a menace. Some people love him, some people hate him. Same thing for Batman. Some people are afraid of him. Some people think he's cleaning up the city. They think he's doing a great job solving the problem. Some people think he is the problem. And so that's kind of a divisive thing. The police are that way, and they kind of have been. Like, we're not being totally sincere when we say the police are villainized now. Since the 60s, police have been called pigs. A lot of people didn't like them in the 60s. It's, you're pigs, you're enforcing segregation, you're enforcing the man, you're enforcing the will of the 1%. That was probably worse in the 60s and 70s. I think now police are seen as a working class job. Some people like myself feel bad that they get paid so little. So I think that now they're at least seen as a working class job. I think in the 60s, a lot of liberals thought they were pawns of the man, that they were the wealthy ones keeping their boots in their necks. Now I think it's more like, well, they're doing a job, but they're doing it poorly and they're doing it violently. So the classism has been taken out of it to an extent, which I think is a little preferable to maybe some of the people who really didn't like them in the 60s. But when I say police culture, it does have to change. There's no denying that, okay, well, some people don't like cops. And they've been brought up to not like cops. They've never liked them. Cops say, I drive through a black neighborhood and a little kid, he does his finger like a gun. He's shooting at me like it's a gun. Well, yeah, true, and that happens. And, some people are not going to like you. Not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody likes Alabama liberal. That's what I'm trying to get at. Not everybody's going to like you. And if you can get over this idea that you need your ass kissed all the time, and even sometimes when you're kind of a dick. I mean, I've had a lot of cops that were way over the line to me. So not just to black people, but like in Alabama, I had one white cop. He wrote me 3 tickets in 6 months for nonsense. And I basically got tickets. A lawyer described it as, you got a ticket for DW30, driving while under 30, right? One was for failure to yield. One was for, he said I pulled out in front of him or some shit, which was crazy. And following too close was another one, tailgating. I mean, it was stuff that was not like speeding, or running a red light or anything like that. It was really minor stuff. And he just did this with he was just a dick. I mean, he was just an asshole. Same thing with a black state trooper. As I was going to Auburn driving back and forth, I got several tickets from him. He was just an asshole. So sometimes you meet people in the police force that are just kind of dicks, and people hate them. They've probably hated them their whole life. I know a kid, this is separate from the 2 other cops I was talking about, but there was a kid that went to high school with me. And everybody hated this kid, and he was hateable. He was a dick. He tattletaled. When they would have parties, he would tell the police where the parties were going to be. I'm not kidding about this. He would report them and get them raided by the police. So, I mean, people called him a narc because he was. But it all came from an idea of he's not popular. He's sort of a small person and a bitter loser. If I can't fuck the cheerleader, then I'm going to ruin the party for the guy who can. And I didn't fuck a cheerleader either. You know what I mean? It comes down to the idea of, I didn't get to, maybe do a lot of the things I wanted to in high school, but I didn't want to wreck the party for everyone else. And that's what I think people who were terrified. And that guy became a cop. I guess I left that part of the story. But of course, that guy became a cop, took it out on people. There was a kid that went to high school with me, not that guy, but a different one, who said, he pulled me over and he went through my car. He took out the seats of my car. He left the seats on the side of the road. He did all this crazy shit searching my car, and they said, have a good day. Didn't help me put none of it back. Got in his police cruiser and drove off. Now that guy right there is your next police shooter. It may not be somebody black. I think he has killed somebody who was white and nobody gave a shit. He shot somebody white and nobody cared. But that is your violent cop. Joins a police force, has a chip on his shoulder, a grudge against the world, and then he takes that on everybody else because he couldn't fuck the cheerleader in high school, so nobody can, goddammit. You're supposed to kiss his ass. He's the top dog. And that ego and that machismo, that's behind a lot of these problems. Political correctness, what people complain about. If black people don't want to be called a certain word, don't call them that. That's their right to not be called that by a fucking stranger. It's not infringing on your rights. They just don't want to be called that. And you still can. Legally, you can. But they're just saying, don't be surprised if I don't like it and I criticize you. They want to say things about black people and have it not be any criticism. And that's different from I'm not legally allowed to do it. But it's the same mentality. The people who bitch about cancel culture, it's media types who think you're supposed to kiss my ass. I'm the most important person in the world. How dare you not know that? Political correctness, same thing. Police culture, the problem cops, not every cop, but the problem cops, it's all the same mentality of look up to me. Be nice to me or else. Don't criticize me or else. And that's what it really boils down to. Finally, even though this is a good place to stop, but I'll go anyway a little bit later, but there's COVID culture, which I brought up earlier. I said I would mention it. I just want to point out that Alabama and California have had very, very different COVID-19 responses. See it on the news. There's rallies where nobody's wearing a mask. It's not mandatory in very conservative places like Northeast Alabama, where I'm from. People say they go into stores. People wear a mask or don't. It's their choice. It's not really like they enforce bans. Here in California, we've been under a year-wide shutdown. So people who don't really understand COVID, they don't understand this. But if I go to a store, I line up outside the store. I wait in line to get items as though it's a bread line. Trump's like, hey, if you have Biden, you'll have bread lines. We had bread lines under Trump. We go outside a store and we wait because they can only allow so many people in a store. And even if you go and it's the right time of day, there's no line, there's not that many people there. It's like, oh, good, I can just run in CVS, I can get something real quick, which you have to do your grocery shopping at fucking CVS, which is ridiculous, because the real grocery stores are so full. I'm like, I can go to Trader Joe's, but I'll have to wait outside for 30 minutes. Or I can go to CVS and buy the worst bread and the worst sandwiches. About tuna sandwich that should not be legally sold. Like people in a North Korean prison camp will not eat their tuna sandwiches, and I buy that and eat it. But you go into CVS, you think, I can just run in and get, I left my mask in the car, which you forget sometimes, right? Like if you put your mask in your cup holder or you keep it in your pocket, and you should wear your mask, and I always do, but sometimes you don't think about it. It's not the most natural thing in the world to think about every time. So you put it in your car, you forget you don't have it on, you walk into CVS, get down. I mean, you would have thought I brought like a suicide bomber jacket. Like I walked into the store wearing a suicide vest or something. You would think that's what I walked in there with, by the way they react to this. So, I mean, you could get tackled if you don't have a mask on, or you'll be told to leave immediately, right? Be told to leave immediately. But people say, well, in Alabama, why do they not socially distance? Why do they not wear a mask? Why do they fight even basic preventions and not want to do these things or whatever? Somewhat similar to this idea of I am the most important person in the world, and if I want to get the world sick, by God, that's what I'm going to do. And it's not your job to tell me that I can't do that. And so if we trace these problems back to the same, it's people pretending that it's about freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom to say whatever I want. You can say whatever you want when it comes to political correctness and cancel culture and anything else like that. But it's just don't expect that there won't be blowback. And if you're a media personality, you may be literally canceled. But you know what? You can get another fucking job. Keith Olbermann got fired like 5 times, not because of anything he really said, but because he's a dick to work with. He got other jobs. Tucker Carlson, if he got fired from Fox News tomorrow, he could buy tuckercarlson.com domain name. He probably already has. $20 a year, have a domain name, and host his own fucking show. And people would watch it and they'd pay him and it wouldn't be that big a deal. And that's assuming he doesn't want to quit. If he does want to quit, he's probably worth $100 million. Limbaugh was worth $500 million. They quit, they go out, they enjoyed their retirement, their savings. 2 or 3 years later, everybody forgets about them. I don't really see the problem, and it's hard for me to totally feel sorry for people like that. But I think that to acknowledge this, you got to really try to end the culture wars, because that's what's driving people to the Republican Party. Mistake of assuming that things that are literally life and death are as important as the way that somebody can make you feel and the way that they can impact what you want to say. Maybe to some people they are that big a deal. Okay, everybody, thanks for listening. Join me next time for episode 82.